let's talk about The Martian by Andy Weir. This is a sci-fi book. Matt Damon's on the cover. It had a big film adaptation in 2015 or so, I think. When was it published? It was slightly before that. 2014 or 2013 was its self-publication, and then I think the film was 2015 or 16. 2015, which I saw at the time and I enjoyed. In that sense, I don't know if that helped or hindered my enjoyment of the book. Certainly I came into it knowing some of the plot beats. I think it probably didn't make very much difference to what I thought of it overall. I enjoyed this. I thought it was good. I think that Weir has a couple of big strengths. I think there's a few things, a few cautions or critiques I'd offer as well. So strengths first. We're in writing, well, look, here's the synopsis. A guy gets stranded on Mars. His mission has to abort when they've landed there. This is in the relatively near future. They have to abort, and so they leave this guy behind because they think he's dead. There's lots of technical complications for him to survive, and then any options about getting home. And so here's the first strength. We mostly get this from the perspective of Mark Watney, Matt Damon, on Mars. He's doing audio logs and saying, this is what's happened today, this is what I've done today, this is how I'm trying to solve the problems. And the big strengths that come up here are that Andy Weir is really strong at Watney is a well-realised character. He is an over-the-top, outsized character, absolutely, but he's a strong character. He's and in fact they play up the point. Yes, of course, one, all astronauts are a bit weird, but two, Watney in particular kind of operates at one end of the scale. There is a cometh the moment, cometh the man thing here, where he is the right guy to get stranded on Mars. He's a botanist and mechanical engineer, and a big thing is that is also a pairing of skills that's really useful for him to try to work out a bunch of the problems they have, or he has to begin with, and then NASA kind of tries to work out how to help him in the future. There's all kinds of issues there: lack of communication, food, issues to do with how you power rovers, the fact that the temporary O2 filters will wear out eventually, the fact that obviously materials have wear and tear in them, and you're in a hostile environment which you can't survive without them. All these problems, and Watney working through his mind, thinking what's going to happen, what he needs to do, trying to stay sane. All that's really well done, and he is a believable winning character in lots of ways. Another strength is that the Technobabble, because for most of us, of course, it's not that much different to Star Trek Technobabble, except we know it's maybe a bit closer to reality. It's convincing, as far as I understand. It's well researched and well done. Some of it I could even say, oh yeah, that sounds about right myself. But most of it that I wouldn't necessarily understand, Weir both gives a clear explanation and an enjoyable, entertaining explanation, and also it does seem to be close to reality. You know, it's one of those hypothetical lines of thought. You know, we don't have this tech now, we couldn't do all these things now, but if you extrapolated some existing technology, what might you be able to do? And yeah, he does that well. I think it's worth noting that there are weaknesses. This gets incredibly highly recommended, and it is not the best book ever. It is a good book. It is not a great book. And the biggest thing, I guess, and I'd probably say this is the only real thing I'd say this was a problem, not I didn't really like this one scene, or I wasn't sure how this worked. Those are small things, and I mean, of course, there's some of those. But the biggest thing is that you cut back to Earth or to other locations and find out what different people are thinking, how they're trying to solve the problem that Mark has by being stuck on Mars. And basically, that's not very strong. The characters aren't very interesting. You don't have the deep dive you do on Mark. Lots of the characters have the same voice. Lots of them are very witty. Lots of them are very clever. Lots of them are kind of like less over the top versions of Mark Watney. They're not strong characters. They are penciled in, and it's it's a 360 page book. That's 50 pages, 60 pages, I guess, something like that. And it's interesting. I did still want to go sometimes to Earth or whatever to be like, yeah, so what do they think of this new situation? How are they going to try to intervene? Their function in the plot was still good, because the plot as a whole is enjoyable and interesting, and compelling. It's all the more compelling because it's Mark and he's trying to solve problems. I think the plot in its own would be okay. Those are some interesting general events, but it's that's just the bones. But yeah, the way that the Earth stuff propels the plot is good and worthwhile. I enjoyed that. But the characters on Earth, the things that were like directly happening on Earth, they actually often seemed kind of surprisingly amateurish in their writing. And that surprises me because Weir has a very strong grasp of writing and of writing Watney, and I guess maybe that's the thing. I think it might have been his debut. It might well be that he had this strong character. He wanted to write this situation. He understood. He was researching. He got, but then he was like, I want to have the other side. So it's not just Mark seeing what happens. I want to have people who kind of can see that Mark's in desperate need, but they can't talk to each other. And that's clever and that's good, but I think that's the side which was weaker. Not technically so much. That's structurally it was fine, but execution-wise, just the characters weren't that exciting. I think as an entry in Mars science fiction, I'm going to do a video on this soon. Science fiction about Mars. I think as an entry in Mars science fiction, it was good fun. It resembles technically something like Red Mars by Kim Stanley Robinson a lot. But that's not a criticism at all. They're both very good at the kind of tech side. It's very different to Red Mars, though, character-wise. Red Mars is operatic. It's psychologically ruminative. It's a deep dive as well in some ways, but much more ruminative, much more curious. Whereas this is bouncy, exciting, adventurous. The characters, or the character that you're dealing with is fun. And so, yeah, as a hard sci-fi book with a fun character, that's an interesting mix, and it works really well. And I think it fits into that subgenre of Mars fiction as a really interesting, fairly distinct entry. In fact, for character, and the characters in many ways aren't much alike, but for character, he's much more in the vein of Ransom in Out of the Silent Planet than he is like the heroes or anti-heroes of Red Mars. That's my thoughts on The Martian. I liked it. If liking means recommendation, I recommend it, and I especially recommend it if you're looking for a slightly interesting, different twist on Mars fiction and disaster fiction. But yes, if you've read it, if you've read other books by Andy Weir, because he obviously has a real fan base now from his next two books as well. Project Artemis and Project Artemis and Project Hail Mary. He's got a fan base, so tell me what you think about his books in the comments, and I'll see you next time.